Hello and welcome back to another session with Math with Mac. This is lesson 5 and today I'll be talking about comparing fractions and decimals. In previous lessons we've covered decimals and fractions separately. Today I'm going to bring them together and show you how in fact they're basically the same type of measurement. Today I'm also going to touch on how to compare fractions with one another in terms of less than, greater than, or equal to. Sometimes we're asked to compare two fractions. For example, I can give you 2/3 and 2/5. And I'm asked which fraction is greater than the other, or which fraction is less than the other, or are the fractions equal? Right now, it's difficult to compare the two fractions because, as in the past, you can see the denominators are not equal. So just as I showed you before with lowest common denominator, we're going to do the same activity here. We're going to first change the denominators into a common multiple. In this case, 3 times 5 is 15. So we're going to make both of these fractions out of 15. In my first fraction, I had to multiply 3 by 5 to get to 15. We're going to do the same with the numerator. 2 times 5 is 10. On the other fraction, we had to multiply the 5 by 3. We do the same to the numerator. That gives us 6. Now we can see that the fraction on the left is 10 out of 15, while the fraction on the right is 6 out of 15. We use this symbol to denote greater than. So I would write the answer as 10 out of 15 is greater than 6 out of 15. I'll show you another example. Here we have 2/3 and 4/5. Again, we're going to find the lowest common denominator, which will be 15. Here I multiplied by a 5, so this becomes 10 out of 15. And here we multiplied by 3, so 4 times 3 is 12. We can see that 10 out of 15 is less than 12 out of 15, so we use this symbol. And the analogy that I explained to the kids is to think of this as a mouth opening up. And the mouth is always hungriest for the largest piece. So in this case, the larger fraction was on the left. The mouth is trying to eat the larger fraction. Here, the larger fraction is on the right, and you can see the mouth is open to this fraction here. Pause. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about changing decimals to fractions, fractions to decimals, comparing the two. I'm going to start off with a decimal point. Here I have 75 hundredths. My 7 is in the tens, my 5 is in the hundredths. We read this as 75 hundredths. I could also write this as 75 over 100. Now, I'm going to show you very simply how to change this decimal into a fraction. So I've shown you already how it can look as a fraction. This is the tenths place. This is the hundredths place. So when we're looking at decimals like this and we're turning it into a fraction, you have to be careful that your denominator here, 100, matches the lowest decimal place. So because this is dealing with hundredths, I'm using 100 as my denominator. The numerator is the value of whatever this number is. Now, because I can reduce this fraction, I'm going to reduce it by the same number for top and bottom. That is, 75 and 100 are both divisible by 25. And in doing so, 75 divided by 25 is 3. And 100 divided by 25 is 4. So decimal 0.75 is actually the same as 3/4. They're equal. Another example. Here I have 6/10. This is the tenths place after the decimal. I could write this as 6/10. This is also a fraction that can be reduced by dividing both the numerator and the denominator by 2, which will yield me 3/5. So 3/5 is the same as 0.6. And I'll do one more example. Here I have 0.50 or 50 hundredths. I could have just drawn the 0.5 and made it 5/10, and it would still, the value would still be the same. Here, both the numerator and the denominator are divisible by 50, which is going to give me 1/2. So 0.5 is the same as a half. Now I'm going to do the opposite. I'm going to take my fractions and turn them into decimals. Pause. So let's start with a simple fraction, 3/4. In order for me to turn this into a decimal place, we're going to turn it into a division question. And I'm going to take the denominator and I'm going to divide it into the numerator. So let's set it up like a division question. 4 divided into 3. When we try this, 3 is too small. It's not possible. So we put a 0 up above. 0 times 4 is 0. I subtract and we get 3. Now I want to continue the problem, so I'm going to introduce a decimal into my question. I'm going to put a decimal mark after the 3. I'm going to put a decimal mark after the 0. I add a 0 to the dividend and I bring down the 0. Now what I've done is I've expanded the question and I can divide 4 into 30, goes 7 times. 7 times 4 is 28. I subtract, I regroup. 10 minus 8 is 2. I can continue the problem by adding another 0, bringing it down. And now I have 4 into 20, which goes 5 times. 5 times 4 is 20. I subtract and I get 0. So in this example, I showed you how to change 3/4, the fraction, into the decimal point. I'll do another example. Here I have 4/5, and I want to turn this into a decimal point. I take the denominator and I divide it into the numerator. So we set it up as a division question. 5 is not divisible into 4. 0 times 5 is 0. Subtract, we get 4. Now we add a decimal point to expand the problem. Add my 0 and bring it down. 5 divided into 40 goes 8 times. 8 times 5 is 40. Subtract, 0 remaining. I'll actually show you one more example where we'll have a repeating number. Let's try 2/3. And I want to change this into a decimal point. 3 into 2 is what we're going to divide. So we'll set it up like a long division question. 3 is not divisible into 2. We add 0. 0 times 3 is 0. Subtract, we get 2. I'm going to add a decimal to both the dividend and the quotient. Bring my 0 down. 3 into 20 goes 6 times. 6 times 3 is 18. And very quickly, you're going to see a repeating pattern here. When we subtract this, we're going to get a 2. We bring it down. And you're going to see that no matter how many times we do this, dividing 3 into 20, I'm ahead of myself. 3 times 6 is 18. We're going to keep getting 20s. And so in this case, you might remember we're going to add a little hat showing that the sixes just keep repeating. But again, this is turning a fraction into a decimal point and vice versa. Pause. So for your benefit, we're going to try some practice questions. I'm going to write them out for you, and then at the end of the video, I'll show you some quick solutions. So in the first case, for number 1, I would like you to compare using less than, greater than, or equal to. So I'll set up some fractions, and maybe I'll add some decimals as well. 3/4, and I'll put a circle here, which is where the answer will go, and on the other side we'll put 5/8. For question B, so here's some questions that you can work on. When you're comparing two fractions together, you're going to have to find a lowest common denominator and then see, once you've converted both fractions, to see which one has the larger numerator, or in some cases they might be the same. What I would recommend for questions that have decimal places is to take your fractions and convert them into decimals, and then you can compare the two. So good luck with those questions, and check back in with the video and I'll show you the solution shortly. Okay, starting with question A, we have 3/4 and 5/8 that we're comparing. I can see that my denominator is not the same, so we're going to make the lowest common denominator will be 8 for the two of them. So 5/8 stays the same. Multiplying the 4 by 2 gives me 8, the same as the top is 6. Here I can clearly see 6 out of 8 is bigger than 5/8, so we write this symbol. For question B, I have on the left 0.60, and we're comparing that to 6/7. In order to compare this, I'm going to divide the denominator into the numerator to see which will be larger. 7 into 6 is not possible. We add our decimals, we bring our 0 down. 7 into 60 goes 8 times. 8 times 7 is 56. We subtract, regroup. We have 4. Bring down another 0. 7 into 40 goes 5 times. 35. Subtract, regroup, and so forth. I don't need to go any further because I can clearly see that decimal 85 is greater than 0.6. So in this case, we write 0.60 is less than 6/7. For question C, we have 3/5 compared to decimal 8. We're going to do the same thing here. We're going to convert the fraction into a decimal. So we're going to divide 5 into 3, which goes 0. Add our decimals. 5 into 30 goes 6 times. We multiply that. So we can see that 0.6 is definitely less than 0.8. For question D, we have 6/9 compared to 3/8. And I have a feeling that 6/9 is going to be bigger, but we want to confirm this. So in order to do that, we need an LCD. In this case, it's going to be 72 by multiplying 9 times 8. So in the top case, we multiply this one by 8. 6 times 8 is 48. In this case, we multiplied by 9. 8 times 9 is 72. 3 times 9 is 27. Clearly, 6/9 is greater than 3/8. And let me just erase my board here so I have some room. For question E, I'll do it up above. We have 5/6 compared to 0.85. We'll convert the fraction into a decimal, so I divide 6 into 5, which goes 0 times. We expand it by adding our decimals and our zeros. 6 into 50 goes 8 times. 8 times 6 is 48. We subtract, we regroup. 10 minus 8 is 2. Let's bring another 0 down. 6 into 20 goes 3 times. 3 times 6 is 18. We're going to get a repeating pattern here where the 3 will continue. So I'll just keep getting 20s. So it's close in this case, but decimal 83 is smaller than, it's less than 0.85. Okay, so there's a quick recap of fractions and decimals, comparing the two and converting fractions into decimals, as well as a quick tutorial on comparing fractions using LCD. I hope the video was helpful, and I'll be making more videos this week. We'll be touching on some new topics. I'd like to get into some geometry and maybe working with some circles this week. So stay tuned, and we'll have another video coming out shortly. Thank you.